Welcome to Mr. Rodman's Top 12 Highlights from Chapter 13 as we take a look today at the federal bureaucracy. What is the bureaucracy? It is essentially those 4.5 million people that comprise the administering and implementation of the laws that are passed by Congress, signed by the president. These are unelected officials, but they are highly trained. They are experts in their field. They definitely specialize in their tasks, and there is a bureaucratic structure, a ladder, if you will, a hierarchy of authority. In terms of who makes up that 4.5 million people, we've got 70% of all government employees coming from the 15 cabinet departments. That includes organizations like the Health and Human Services, which is the largest, as well as agencies like Department of Defense, the Postal Service. The workers of the Postal Service make up about 700,000 people. And then we've got the military, almost 1.5 million coming from there. And then we have contractors, people, about 7.5 million people who work for private companies as contractors for the government, such as working for NASA or providing vouchers for schools and government funds to pay for those types of things, as well as low income under fair housing and things like that. Then we have another almost 3 million working at colleges and universities through grants and so forth. So about 15 million people total either work for the government, related to the government, or as a contractor for the government. And this is where 93% of the federal budget comes from. So a significant portion of the overall budget. Who's in the bureaucracy? Well, we talked about the appointees. 600 of them are approved by the Senate of the about 3,000 the president can make. And this includes the cabinet level officials as well as those that are head of the agencies and so forth. Then we also have what we talked about in class as the SES, or the Senior Executive Service. That's about 7,000 people that are civil servants that make up that organization. Those are the people that have worked in government the longest. They're chosen based on merit. They've worked a significant number of years and worked their way up through the service. They're highly experienced and have a great area of expertise in their field, and are really the go-to people that the appointees of the president will look to in terms of helping to make change or get things done within a department or within a cabinet position. Then we have the civil servants, and those are chosen through the civil service and the civil service exam that it's administered by OPM, or the Office of Personnel Management. Those are the merit-based jobs. Those aren't the spoils system. Those are the people that actually take the civil service exam based on their level of expertise and interest. They can fill competitive positions. The Pendleton and Hatch Acts are significant here because the Pendleton Act essentially created the civil service. And then the Hatch Act is basically what is limiting civil service employees from participating in what we call electioneering activities. Keep in mind that the spoil system was pretty corrupt by the time we got to President Garfield, and there was a frustrated job seeker. He didn't like the fact he was overlooked for a position and assassinated President Garfield. The Congress and the presidents and politicians at that time looked at it and said, we need to overhaul the system. We need to create something that's better than just to the winner go the spoils. So while there are still spoils positions in those 3,000 plus positions that are created, there is a merit system that really takes the politics out of it. And this is an exam that you would take, an application process, and you're chosen based on merit as opposed to based on who you know. The Hatch Act then is going to limit political activities through that process. So if you work for the civil service, you cannot take an active role in partisan politics. You cannot run for office. And you can hold party positions and you can participate in fundraising or campaigning activities, but you can't use your office in order to do that. And then other agencies are even more restrictive in terms of what they will and won't let you do as a part of that. So while the law has been relaxed since it was initially passed, there are specific requirements in terms of what, or restrictions in terms of what civil service employees can and cannot do. As we talked about in class, the 5 bureaucratic pathologies that really get in the way of government implementing and administering the laws are really red tape, too many complex rules and procedures, conflict, the agencies are working at cross purposes, duplication, we've got agencies that are doing the same thing or something similar, imperialism, an agency that doesn't want to work with another agency because they feel like they're in the right and the other agency's in the wrong, and then waste, in which agencies are spending more than they probably need to in a particular area, but again, going back to imperialism, they think their way is the right way, and therefore that's why they spend the money. So what does the bureaucracy do? Again, they implement or carry out the laws that are passed by Congress, signed by the president, as well as the executive orders that are given by the president. As long as the Supreme Court's not ruling any of those unconstitutional, the bureaucracy is implementing those. That also means they're administering, sending out paychecks to Social Security beneficiaries through the administration, as well as issuing rules and potential rules and regulations that an agency then could regulate in order to enforce laws and orders that have been passed by the Congress and signed by the President. In terms of how they execute that, it's really done with what we call discretionary authority. This is the idea that the agency has the discretion in order to make a decision about how they go about doing this. Congress doesn't go through when they write the law and talk about all of the policy making ways that this may be impacted or questions that may come up or for instances types of situations. That's really where the bureaucracy is given the discretionary authority to make those decisions. Why is Congress giving them the power? Well, in a lot of cases it's because of their expertise. They have the expertise and the know-how within the bureaucracy, within that agency, in order to get things done. And Congress gives them that authority, and if it's questioned at any time, then Congress can call them in for hearings, can call them up to Capitol Hill in order to testify and basically grill them or ask them questions about why they did such a certain thing, why they imposed rules or implemented rules in a way that they did. And so that's where Congress really does have a check on the bureaucracy in terms of that authority. Other constitutional controls that are in place for the bureaucracy. We know that members of Congress can't hold other positions, so they can't hold a position within the bureaucracy. They would need to choose one or the other. The president is given the authority over the bureaucracy as part of the executive branch, so he's really controlling what government does and does not do, setting the policy agenda for those agencies, and tasking the secretaries and those in appointed positions within the authority of the bureaucracy in order to implement what the president sets as the policy agenda. And then the president really gives the appointees that authority, for better or worse, to implement that. So they are limited in terms of what the bureaucracy can do by Congress, and we'll talk about that in a second. Congress, again, with the power of the purse, can appropriate money or withdraw money or hold back funds from an agency that they feel is doing things inappropriately or not effective, and again, call them in for hearings and so forth. And then the ultimate advice and consent from the Senate is that they can reject the president's appointments to that cabinet position in order to remind the president and the agency of the power-making, the authority that Congress has there in terms of the power of the purse, but also in terms of the leadership that the president is appointing and how the Senate plays a role in approving that appointment. In terms of differentiating the bureaucratic agencies, and again, this goes back to the website blog that I had you read about the differences in the agencies, but essentially what you need to narrow it down to here is there are 4 different types of quote-unquote agencies. The first one are the cabinet departments, and if it's a cabinet position, it would be called Department of whatever, State, Defense, Department of Interior, so forth. If it's a regulatory commission, it's going to be regulating some particular aspect of the American economy, and so the regulatory aspect, such as the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, is going to regulate that, and you're going to see that outlined here in the 3rd row. So we've got the cabinet in the 1st row, we've got the regulatory commissions in the 3rd row. Then we've got in the 2nd row the independent executive agencies. These are the ones that have a little more flexibility, and they're really specialists in their field, as are the ones that we see in the regulatory and the cabinet positions. But here is where they're really given a lot of independence in terms of how they carry out their mission. The president appoints them, the president gives them an authority in terms of the agenda that he'd like to outline for their agency, and then really gives them the authority to go and get the job done. And so the president will report in from time to time, or have them report in from time to time, but really that's the authority that he's giving them to carry it out. And then the last one is the government corporations, the last row that we see here. And these are essentially for-profit corporations run by the government, such as Amtrak or the Postal Service, that are charging for their services, but essentially are are run by the government in terms of, again, setting the president's policy agenda. So in terms of differentiating the agencies, all of the agency heads or department heads are appointed by the president, and most of them serve at the pleasure of the president. The only exception to that is the regulatory commissions. The regulatory commissions are the ones that cannot be fired except for cause. So if the president, because they're a regulatory aspect, they need to be given the authority to regulate various agencies and determine nonpartisan wise that whether it's Democrats, Republicans, or nonpartisans are within the confines of the law, and so that's why they can only be fired for cause. Meanwhile, the other ones all serve at the pleasure of the president, which is a fair distinction in terms of differentiating those agencies. In terms of checks on the bureaucracy, we have a number of different acts that limit the bureaucracy in terms of what they can do. Again, the Administrative Procedure Act is going to establish their regulations in terms of how agencies propose rulemaking, open up for hearings by the public, and so forth. So that is really going to regulate how they implement laws. Freedom of Information, or FOIA, is going to give the public and the press access to what the bureaucracy is doing. Rules and regulations like the Environmental Policy Act is going to make them submit things like environmental impact statements, or EIS, in order for them to bring about change. If it's Department of Transportation, an EIS is required before any type of major highway work is done. We also have the Privacy Act in terms of doing everything they can to guard personnel records. Now, we know that this hasn't always been the case. We know with the China hacking incident from 2015 that hacked into the OPM records of the Office of Personnel Management, and a significant number of the bureaucracy and even candidates that were interested in jobs within the bureaucracy, their potential records were compromised. So this is why we have these types of laws to get to the heart of checking the bureaucracy to make sure that their rulemaking and their authority doesn't get out of control. In terms of the effects of the checks, these are some of the reasons why government acts more slowly and inconsistently, sometimes why they're slower to move on action, or perhaps some lower ranking employees are reluctant to make decisions. And this is why some of the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic pathologies, come into play, because of some of the constraints that are on them by us, by the American people and the press, and the political aspects of what we see government and the surveying and the polls about how we view the bureaucracy today. And those demands require that government is more open and more honest and fair, but it also means that they may act more slowly and inconsistently in order to get it right, in order to make sure that they're doing what they should be doing within the confines of the law. So how does the president check or constrain the bureaucracy? Well, obviously we talked about he can appoint and remove those heads. He can also reorganize the bureaucracy, as President George W. Bush did after 9/11, again with congressional approval, to establish the Department of Homeland Security so that the CIA, FBI, and other security agencies can protect the American people. The president also proposes the annual budget. Again, the Congress, with the power of the purse, can check that. But again, the president has the ability to propose that budget, and so can shift the policy agenda based on the money that they're allotting. He can also decide to ignore legislative initiatives that the bureaucracy may want, not seeing it as part of the policy agenda, and can alter their actions in terms of what he's setting out to do. An executive order by the president could also check or constrain the bureaucracy in terms of what they may be doing and the president doesn't want them to do, or what they may be doing and what they want to do, and the president is supporting them in that effort. And then obviously the power of the purse going to Congress, but again, the president proposing the budget makes all the difference in terms of the type of budget that would go before Congress, even though they would do a significant amount of editing before it passed. So how can Congress check the bureaucracy? Well, we talked about the power of the purse, but also legislation that could alter their activities, changing the bureaucracy in terms of those cabinet positions or departments, or how those departments within the departments report up to the cabinet level positions. Getting rid of programs or cutting funding is in a significant way, and then writing specific legislation that limits the bureaucracy's decision-making power could definitely be a constraint for the bureaucracy. don't forget that they're a part of the Iron Triangle. They're a part of that role between the interest groups and Congress that really is well established in terms of those senior executives that are trying to implement rules and provide discretionary authority within their agency. So that discretion is a significant part of the rulemaking and rule-making process for the bureaucracy, and Congress's check on that is going to involve what relationships they may or may not have within those iron triangles in those specific departments of the bureaucracy. So that could be significant in terms of, hey, Congress likes what you're doing, they're not going to constrain you as much in that area. They have established iron triangles in those locations to help you, versus an agency where they don't have those established iron triangles. They're probably going to be much more critical of the work that you're doing and try and write more laws and cut more funding, or guide more of the funding to go to specific areas that support their policy agenda, as opposed to the president's or the bureaucracies. Also keep in mind that the courts have the authority to check or constrain the bureaucracy by overturning executive orders or regulations that are passed by Congress. So at all times, the bureaucracy may be implementing a law, and all of a sudden it's brought before the Supreme Court and they declare it to be unconstitutional. That is the role of the courts in this rulemaking process of the bureaucracy implementing the law. And lastly, the question that always comes up is, does the federal bureaucracy actually work? While most Americans are skeptical of this, we certainly don't want a wholesale change in terms of what happened. Grandma Hilda still wants her Social Security check, and those that are unemployed still want to see those benefits coming through unemployment benefits and so forth. So we know in times of trouble we rely on government, and specifically the experts in government, in order to make things happen. But we do overall tend to poll more significantly that we don't always have the trust in government that we wish that we had, in which they could carry things out more effectively. And that really is the crux of the matter in terms of how politicians and those running for office appeal to the electorate, because being head of the bureaucracy and that 4.5 million plus people that are working there is significant in terms of the questions that the president or president-elect would have to answer in terms of how they're going to implement their policy agenda. How are they going to carry this out with 4.5 million people and all kinds of moving parts all at the same time? That is really the significance here that a president has to address and ultimately has to answer when they get elected. Hope you've enjoyed this top 12 from Chapter 13 on Mr. Rodman's top 12 highlights. Hope you found it beneficial. Good luck, live the 5, demonstrate your awesomeness on the quiz, and good luck.